How technology could do so much to improve the reporting process and the process by which journalists disseminate their work, and how rarely newsrooms actually get that technology and use it in a way that makes that kind of impact. And we've been doing work with the political fact checkers in the United States and around the world that offer some clues and hints as to how that could be done in a way that's more realistic for news organizations. Small and medium news organizations just have a hell of a time figuring out how to make this stuff work. They're so busy, they're so cash strapped, they're human, they don't always have the humans they need to do this kind of work. But these are problems that can be conquered. So there are really two kinds of fact checking that are going on out there. There's the fact checking of what I think of as unofficial misinformation, or the stuff people call fake news. And that's often about verifying hoaxes and things like that. It's a very widespread problem. People like Snopes have been fighting it long before any of us ever heard there was such a thing as fake news. It's a big problem. I'm not sure in reality if it's so much bigger a problem than it was when people could see trashy headlines in grocery store checkout lines that also had a big impact and a big reach. I think we've always been competing with that kind of misinformation. It's a problem. People are doing smart things to try to combat it. And then the other kind of fact checking focuses on official misinformation. So this is when politicians, prominent people in society, prominent organizations, political parties, companies make statements that are known to be false and inaccurate. And fact checkers do a different kind of fact checking to verify those claims, because they're not always as easy as is that photo made up or not? It ends up being more about, are those numbers exactly right? Is that misleading? Is it really going up and down? And it involves a lot of really complicated reporting. Both forms are complicated. They're different problems. Technology can help solve both. Right. I mean, it's kind of a polite dinner conversation effect. Is like, how do you tell someone that someone they like is a lying liar? So this is always hard, and whether it's Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or any number of politicians across Europe and around the world, people have a strong affinity for the political leaders they support. So correcting misinformation about them with their key supporters is often very hard. And we are looking at ways to present that information more effectively to audiences that may not be receptive to certain fact checkers' findings. That doesn't mean you sort of pull your punches. It means it may be the way you write a headline. It may be how you present the conclusion. Should the conclusion be at the top of the story? This is wrong and here's why. Or should the conclusion be at the bottom of the story? It's like, well, we've walked you through the evidence. In the end, that just leads us to the fact that this was wrong. And there's a lot of different ways at it. A lot of user testing, a lot of experimentation will help us figure out what works best. Yeah, PolitiFact has actually got a grant to go into very red state parts of the United States to sort of try to cultivate a different kind of relationship with that community and see if there was a way to explain what they were doing in a way that would win over people. And that was an interesting bit of R&D on their part. The trust in the media issue is really interesting because it's so tied to party. And on the one hand, in the U.S., you have a part of the electorate that generally supports the press and a part of the electorate that doesn't. But when another party was in control of Washington, even that segment of the public didn't like the press as much. And the segment that usually doesn't like the press liked them a little bit more. So it's a very partisan thing. I don't know that AI can overcome the very primal, tribal nature of politics in the United States or everywhere else for that matter. Trust in the media has got to be built sort of like one story at a time and one organization at a time. I think this technology ultimately helps with it, but it's a bigger problem than a bit of code is going to fix. Well, I mean, all technology has potentially scary applications. The idea that we'll simply deploy AIs to write stories and then fire all the journalists because we'll have AIs to do it. That's a scary scenario, but I don't think that that's going to happen. What I think the more useful use of that kind of technology in newsrooms is the kind of thing we're doing, which is if I'm a team of 2 or 3 fact checkers at the Washington Post and I have a lot of stuff I could possibly write stories about in any given day or week, if there is a bit of code that can go sift through thousands and thousands of pages of transcripts every day for me and flag certain statements as being potentially of interest, then I'm looking at 10 or 15 or 20 most likely targets. That's something we've built and deployed and is already making fact checkers more efficient. They're writing stories based on statements they find that way. And what's interesting is sometimes it's not even the statement that they find that way that they end up fact checking. It becomes a tip that says, where did that claim come from? And when they investigate it further, they eventually realize that it's a talking point being used by these people, and here's how it's been used in multiple places, and it becomes a bigger story. And all because a little robot built by a bunch of college students pointed out the right line and the right transcript to them.